we all have our soft spot for people who we rooted for, who we grew up loving, and in my case, somebody very special. I'm going to get emotional. I do this a lot, but my life, professional life, since leaving ESPN in 2003 wouldn't be what it was, obviously, without NFL Network. And NFL Network would not have existed without two people who got in today. One of whom is Paul Tagliabue. He was the commissioner at the time, who I've never really had an in-depth conversation with him about what arms he had to twist to have each 32 members of the National Football League cough up a nice chunk of change to help launch our network. But the other gentleman that's on the screen with the photograph with Paul Tagliabue right now, the fact that he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is really emotional for me because he's no longer with us, and he's one of the sweetest guys I've ever met. And he's Steve Sabol, the longtime NFL Films administrator and president and son of the founder, Ed, who's already in the Hall of Fame. And, you hear when people get named into the Hall of Fame from time to time, hey, how is that guy not already in? Are you telling me that person's not already in? Steve Sabol was not in. And he was suffering from the cancer that took him from us when his dad was going in, and thankfully he was still with us when Ed went in, and he was there for that day. And he and Ed are now looking down today with their long lens. And I speak for a ton of people who work in the NFL and work at NFL Films and certainly at NFL Network and say, way to go, Steve Sabol. That is your best shot right there. So awesome. So many of us have grown up and love this sport because of that spinning football that comes right at us. And, of course, the voice of God and John Facenda, who Steve once told me.
The outtakes, right?
He had outtakes. He told me he once had outtakes of Facenda cursing up a storm.
You imagine that voice, like dropping F-bombs?
Yes, like because when he screwed up some of his takes, and I do that a lot too.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
We're human. But Steve, I'm like, can I ever hear that? Nope. But that's why NFL Films is so successful as it has been, is the trust level. The trust level that coaches and players gave to the Sabols because they earned it. And all of us as fans have been rewarded by getting a glimpse as to what goes on behind the scenes because these players and coaches are mic'd up. Steve once told me a story about how George Allen could be seen running into halftime at the old RFK, ripping his mic off because he was so superstitious. He had never really worn a mic for a big game, and he ripped the mic off because his team was down, and he blamed it on NFL Films that they were down at halftime. And I could go on and on with all these stories, but to add the music and the pageantry and the love of films to the National Football League, all of us, we are so thankful. Couldn't be more thrilled about this. Really, I'm over the moon. I will never forget the day we're on NFL Network, and again, we launched NFL Network. The first voice you heard was Steve Sabol, because we started with the network came on the air. It wasn't me just strolling out on NFL Total Access. It started with a 2-minute video that NFL Films put together, sort of like a countdown from 2 minutes down to start the NFL Network. And you still hear Steve Sabol's voice saying, "This is you're watching a production of NFL Network."
Still on when there's games on the network.
It's great when games on the network or right before.
It's awesome.
Right before NFL 100 shows.
Following is a presentation of the National Football.
I'm walking in, the studio's on the other side of the offices at NFL Network in Culver City. And I guess we only have a year to go. I think we're moving into the new stadium soon. at some point. I don't know. I shouldn't say these things. I don't know the exact date. But studios on the other side of the offices. I go from Total Access Studio to come back to the office. And this is back when there were literally 25 employees of the NFL Network. And I stroll in, and as I'm going back out to the studio, who walks in but Ed Sabol? Unannounced.
Just showed up.
Yeah. Wanted to see what everything's all about, this whole NFL Network thing.
Great.
Unannounced. How are you, Ed? Rich Eisen. Watch you all the time, sitting there in Arizona. I'm like, that's great. Awesome. Anybody know you're here, Ed? No, nobody knows I'm here. I'm like, all right, Ed, would you mind just taking a seat right here? Put him in the seat in the foyer of NFL Network, where people who would normally just come to drop stuff off or messenger things or whatever. There's Ed Sabol sitting there. I go into the offices of our president, Steve Bornstein. And I go, Steve, what's up, Richie boy? I'm like, hey, Steve, are you aware Ed Sabol's here? And he might have used the F-bomb, like, get out of here, really? I'm like, yeah. And Steve took him personally on a tour of the facility. Because, again, we would not have existed as a 24/7, 365 entity covering the NFL without the library of NFL films to fill out that amount of programming hours. Period. End of story. So what you see today on NFL Network, where Good Morning Football is announcing Steve Sabol's enshrinement into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and watching currently the coverage of championship weekend press conference palooza.
Going on right now.
It's going on right now, and we'll have all of that for you. Doesn't exist without Sabol. Doesn't. And I would also say Tagliabue. And my buddy Steve Bornstein. Throw him in there too. Because without it, this doesn't exist. So it's very personal for me. I will just never forget that moment.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.